Images of DC's character roster reach beyond the comic book world to be part of our culture. These portrayals, created over 40 years ago, remain the iconic versions of Superman, Batman, and many other familiar heroes. And they were all created by one artist, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Garcia Lopez grew up in Argentina since the age of 3, having been born 3 years earlier in Spain in 1948. His drawing talent was apparent at a very early age, and he started working professionally at the age of 13. He worked for small publishers around Buenos Aires, took on an apprenticeship, and did production work alongside covers and other artwork. At 16, he started going to art school at night, juggling classes with this professional work, often working in bars in whatever windows of time he could find between his work shift and classes, at least until the owners realized he wasn't old enough to be in the bar. One of his instructors was the legendary comic artist Alberto Breccia, who taught illustration for fiction, children's books, and advertising. When he was 18, he got work through an agent drawing romance comics for Charlton. His work was already far above average, and the Charlton romance work, and a sci-fi book for a Catholic publisher who was branching out into comics, finally gave him opportunities to work at a larger publisher, Columba, where he worked most notably on Roland, a pirate adventure, as well as adaptations of Spanish classics from authors like Cervantes and Lope de Vega. In 1974, he made the move to America. He didn't have any work lined up, he was just planning on trusting his luck to find work. Unsurprisingly, it didn't take long. After getting an apartment in Hell's Kitchen, he walked over to the address he had found in the publisher's notes of DC Comics, but got lost in Rockefeller Center. He regrouped and reached out to a fellow Argentinian artist working in New York, who agreed to take him to DC's office the next day. This time he found his way to DC, and they, again unsurprisingly, gave him work that same day. His friend, the artist Frank Ioni, who had done work for Mad Magazine and other publishers, asked if he'd like to be introduced over at Marvel as well. His response? No, please, I have enough. Imagine if he had gone to Marvel first. He quickly graduated from inking onto his own books, the first of which was Hercules Unbound with writer Gary Conway. A lot of this work was inked by Wally Wood, a comics legend in his own right, who always brought a lot of his own style over to work he was finishing. Next, he and writer Michael Fleischer collaborated to produce Jonah Hex's first ongoing series. Believe it or not, he wasn't comfortable with superheroes at the time, believing he didn't quite have the feel for them. It's tough to imagine that the artist who, at least for me, defines the look of American superheroes ever felt this way. But Garcia Lopez would soon have a chance to get the hang of drawing some of DC's most iconic characters when he started Superman vs. Wonder Woman, this time inked by Dan Atkins. The artist said, "When they asked me to do this job, the first thing they did was bring me to Infantino's office. It was Joe Orlando and someone else, I don't remember who, and they showed me Superman vs. Spider-Man, which was done by Ross Andru and Gordiano. It was terrific, really terrific. I guess it was the first thing I saw in comic books that really made an impact on me. I remembered the stuff from Neil Adams and all, but this book was pure comic book stuff. It wasn't illustration, it wasn't the artist trying to show off his talent. It was all about the characters, the movement. And they asked me, 'Can you do something like this?' And I said, 'Well, I don't know. This is terrific. I don't think I'd be able.' But they told me, 'No, we think you can do it.' And that was it." Clearly, comic readers agreed. A lot of his work from this point on would be on smaller runs or specials because, as he admits, he wasn't great with deadlines. The artist said, "I don't remember. I didn't pay too much attention to deadlines really. It's the only unprofessional part of my career. I don't remember if they gave me a deadline or if they thought I would be able to do it faster than I did. I've never been very fast. It's very difficult for me to sacrifice the work." But things still worked out for Garcia Lopez because, as you can see, by this time, his work was among the best comics had ever seen. In 1981, he followed this up with the artwork for Batman vs. Hulk in DC Special Series number 27. Sometimes, when you see a DC or Marvel artist jump onto the other company's characters, they seem a little off. But Garcia Lopez's Hulk was a classic that stands up to the best versions we'd seen from other Marvel artists. He did more great DC work during this period. He drew the first appearance of the Snowman in Batman 337. He also penciled a few issues of the New Teen Titans in '85. Writer Marv Wolfman commented, I knew that I had this incredible artist who could draw almost anything I wanted, so I decided to make the story just the biggest spectacle I could come up with. While he's best known for his iconic versions of DC's superheroes, Garcia Lopez also has a great flair for sci-fi. The Star Raiders graphic novel, with its lush, painted artwork, is a great example of this. Garcia Lopez took the time to fill in for Steve the Dude Rude, another favorite artist of mine, on his and Mike Baron's Nexus. I usually hate to find a back issue of Nexus and realize it's not by the dude, but it's never a disappointment to see Garcia Lopez's art as a substitution. One added bonus, Mike Baron's Badger made a guest appearance in this issue. He also did a run on the licensed comic Atari Force, making what would be a forgettable tie-in to capitalize on the popularity of the new video game console an artistic showcase that's still highly sought after by collectors today. These works set the stage for one of the all-time great sci-fi comics, but we'll get to that in a bit. By far, the most well-known work Garcia Lopez ever produced is, as you might have guessed, the legendary DC Style Guide. Here's how it came together. At this time, in 1979 or 1980, the artist had moved to Miami for a few years, but received a call from DC's Joe Orlando. They brought Garcia Lopez to New York for a week and a half as they shared their plans about the project they had in mind. The artist recounts, Warner had already done style guides for animation, the Looney Tunes characters. The idea was to do something similar for the characters at DC. They wanted something that would unify the DC character line so that no matter who was drawing them, the characters would still look like they belonged in the same world. I remember we had a meeting with an executive from Warner and we had a supervisor from Warner also. I went back to Miami Beach and started working on it. I did sketches, and the sketches included all the costuming and design elements of each character, and they selected the ones they wanted to use. Then I took those and did the pencils. Dick Gordiano did the inking. Some of those sketches were based on classic poses, especially with characters like Superman and Batman, which they already had in mind that they wanted to use. At the same time, I had the freedom to come up with other poses, other ideas. We worked that way, and everybody was very happy with the results. When it was finished, it was something all the artists wanted to have. At least, that's what they told me. Some people told me they were going to do a job for DC just to get the book. You may have seen that DC is re-releasing the Style Guide, now over 40 years old, so comic readers can finally get a look at this complete masterwork, all without having to illustrate a book for DC Comics. It's a testament to how enduring these illustrations have been. Chances are, if you see a Superman lunchbox or a Flash t-shirt, it's still Garcia Lopez's art, after all this time, that's being used. And DC continued to have their greatest artists update this style guide over the years. When the Batman movies were released in the late 80s and 90s, Garcia Lopez's interpretations of the cinematic characters bridged the gap between the larger-than-life comic versions of the characters and what Hollywood was able to produce. In a lot of ways, as great as those movies looked, and hey, even Batman and Robin at least looked good, it's Garcia Lopez's art on all the licensing products that defined those versions of Batman and his supporting cast. But the artist was still producing comics during this period, usually one-shots, fill-ins, and miniseries, so he'd have time to create the flawless, dynamic work he's known for. If you're a fan of comic art like I am, be sure to like this video and subscribe. I'll have a lot more deep dives into the legendary artist whose work inspires us, and that's the best way to make sure you see it. Also, you can click on the link tree in the description right below to take a look at the comics this art inspired me to make. We Are Scarlet Twilight is a pulp-influenced thriller inspired by Batman and other heroes of the 30s and 40s. It's a combination of the Art Deco atmosphere of Golden Age comics with all the best stuff we expect to see in comics today. And my other book, August, is an 80s-inspired sci-fi space opera with some spaghetti western thrown in. If you're a fan of Star Wars, Transformers, He-Man, any of that stuff, this is the book for you. I tried to make it feel like something awesome from the late 80s that you get to go back and read for the first time. You can check out both of these at the link below, single issues, collections, or live campaigns. And let's get back to the video. Cinder and Ash, from 1988, is a noir comic set in New Orleans, written by Jerry Conway. It follows two private investigators as they look for a kidnapping victim and struggle with the trauma each of them suffered in Vietnam during the conflict. And that sci-fi epic I mentioned earlier, it's one of my all-time favorite comics, Twilight. Garcia Lopez teamed up with writer Howard Chaykin, who deconstructed DC's Silver Age science heroes and united them into a single, galaxy-spanning epic. It's a darker look at these formerly one-dimensional heroes, The designs are of the era, but they're timeless enough not to seem retro. And as always, Garcia Lopez brought his unmatchable draftsmanship to every page, be it space cruisers soaring through the galaxy or epic crowd scenes with hundreds of characters. He also drew Road to Perdition, written by Max Allan Collins, which was later adapted into a film with Paul Newman, Tom Hanks, and future 007 Daniel Craig. In the 2000s, Garcia Lopez continued to contribute to runs on classic DC characters. A 2009 arc in Batman Confidential introduced a more realistic take on the 1960s TV villain, King Tut. And he worked with writer Len Wein adapting an unused script from the same Adam West series by sci-fi legend Harlan Ellison, which introduced Two-Face to the Batman 66 world. In Wednesday Comics, he took advantage of the oversized format to highlight the Metal Men, and continues to contribute artwork for short stories and DC anthologies to this day. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez's art is still the iconic interpretation of DC's heroes. These images go beyond nostalgia. In my opinion, they've become part of our American mythology, and his layouts, expressive characters, and flawless draftsmanship make his work the high watermark other artists judge themselves by. Probably the best illustration of this is an anecdote from DC editor Andrew Heller. I can't remember exactly when it happened, only that it did. I sat in my office one day, a man stepped into my doorway and stared at a point in the wall behind me and just above my head. Although I'd never met the man, I knew his distinctive face. It was Jean Girard, also known as Mobius, and he was staring at a drawing of Wonder Woman by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Without acknowledging me, he inched his way into my office and behind my desk until he was just in front of the drawing. He shifted his glasses down off his nose to get a better look at the drawing. After a moment, he turned to me. "This Garcia Lopez?" he asked in a heavy French accent. "He uses models, no?" "No," I answered, smiling. "Son of a," Mobius hissed. He didn't need to say another word. I already knew it was the highest compliment one artist could pay to another. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any favorite artists you'd like to see me tackle next, let me know in the comments. Until next time, have a good one.